Hello, I am Betsabeth Sastre Flores, commercial horticulturist from Virginia Copper Extension in Loudoun County, Virginia. In a healthy soil, where the roots and other living beings embrace silently, lies the secret of the health of the world. In this microcosm invisible to the naked eye, life itself resides. I follow the 4 principles of the soil because it is the biodiversity, sustainability, and prosperity of our planet.
Welcome, everyone, to another podcast episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii. Joining me, Mary Skatch Bryant with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition and Eric Benfelt with the Virginia Cooperative Extension Community Viability. Eric, if you would do our special introduction today.
Yes, Jeff, thank you. We're very pleased to have with us Mr. Philip J. Haynie III, commonly known as P.J. Haynie. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Haynie Family Farms and also Haynie Family Foods in the northern neck of Virginia in the Reedville area. And PJ also graduated from Virginia Tech with a Bachelor's of Science degree in Agriculture and Applied Economics, was a president of Virginia Tech's Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences chapter, and was helped to found the National Black Growers Council in 2009 and was a past co-chair of that organization. So we're very pleased to have PJ with us, and PJ's on the road back to Virginia, so he can tell us a little bit more about the history of the farm, because PJ's a 5th generation farmer. Welcome, PJ.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you everyone else for having me here on the call this morning. I'm honored to be here. As Eric stated, I'm a proud Virginia Tech alum and have strong roots in the Virginia, especially the northern neck of Virginia. My hometown is Reedville. And Northumberland County, where my family lineage goes back 5 generations to the late Reverend Robert Haynie, my great-great-grandfather, who was the first African-American to purchase land in that county on September 14, 1867. And by the grace of God, my family still owns, and we farm a portion of that original acreage today, and we have expanded across 4 counties in Virginia and 4 counties in Arkansas over the last 157 years. So honored to be here.
And PJ, you know, having expanded that acreage and growing your operation, I know that a big focus of yours is sustainability and efficiency. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing, say on your Virginia acres, whether with the soil or with precision agriculture, to ensure that efficiency and sustainability?
Absolutely. So, I think we were trying to incorporate some sustainable methods before it was cool, before it became such a buzzword. We're in a non-irrigated environment over in the northern neck, where we primarily grow winter wheat, winter barley, a little bit of winter canola, and we double crop. And I remember in high school, after Roundup came out, and my dad bought a first stripper header back in the 90s, where we would strip the heads off the wheat and barley to leave that straw standing, and we would no-till plant in the straw for our double crop soybeans. And, we had to figure out methods to get the right coulters to cut through the straw, get the right seed depth. And, from there, it's just kind of evolved into different methods. But we use that to mitigate not having any irrigation where we are. And we use that to make sure the straw from the previous crop, the winter wheat or the winter barley, can help conserve moisture on the ground, as well as decay and become organic matter for us in the soil. A lot of people want to know, hey, you want to sell that straw in your wheat field? And my dad always says, we put a lot of money in getting that straw. We want it to go back in the soil and give us some return on our investment. So that's to the extent of our sustainability. And, in addition to now we're putting more cover crops into our mixes. We've this year started to strip till and banned our fertilizer instead of broadcasting that in order to be better stewards of the land in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, as well as, reduce some of the expenses that we have associated with the high cost of production this year.
And PJ, I know in the past I have taken farmers to the Chesapeake Bay in collaboration with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and Reedville was a departing point for us. But if you could share a little bit more about the soils that you're dealing with and what the landscape is like there in Northumberland County and the surrounding area.
Well, the northern neck comprises 4 counties, which is Westmoreland to the west, Northumberland to the east, Richmond County to the southeast, and Lancaster County to the southeast, and Richmond County to the southwest. And those 4 counties are in that northernmost finger of land that's nestled between the Potomac River and the Chesapeake Bay. And that's why they call us the Northern Neck. We are primarily in a sandy soil platform where we are, close to the water. And, we have some heavy soils in some areas, in some of our neckland, we call it, but most of it's a sandy loam that we operate in. And that's one of the reasons why we grow pretty good winter crops with that sandy soil. That water kind of drains pretty good through the sand particles and allows us to not have a crop with wet feet during the winter months where we have a lot more precipitation. So that's the lay of the land. A lot of people don't realize it, but those 4 counties, Northumberland, Richmond, Lancaster, and Westmoreland, those 4 counties have over 1,000 miles of shoreline. And as I explained to people, it's 1,000 miles from Richmond, Virginia to Miami, Florida. So we have a lot of coastal plain where we are, and that's one of the things we do to kind of protect that environment where we're located.
We're talking today with PJ Haynie, who is on the road today traveling between farms. He has a diversified farming operation in Virginia and also a rice operation in the Delta region of Arkansas. He also owns and operates several agribusinesses, including Haynie Family Foods, and we want to ask you about that in just a moment. But first thing, PJ, you mentioned just a moment ago the word strip till. I have a feeling that a lot of our listeners might be, as myself, vaguely familiar with strip till, but can you explain it to us? How does it work?
Well, typically in our fertilizer applications, especially for our spring crops, our corn or our full season soybeans, we would go out and broadcast fertilizer with a spinner rig, and that was just slinging that fertilizer all over the ground. And, typically we would incorporate that with the tillage tool, or if we're trying to just no-till, we'll put it out early and it'll just dissolve and go in the ground. However, with that proximity to Chesapeake Bay, we're more subject to leaching and runoff, with that broadcast. And if we're planting in a 30-inch row platform, that's a lot of fertilizer in between those 30-inch rows that's scattered across the ground. Well, the strip till allows us to band that fertilizer, and we place it about 8 inches below the seed in a row. So the strips out in the field are 30 inches wide, and we plant right on top of that strips. And it allows us to reduce the amount of fertilizer we apply because it's concentrated right in the root zone versus typically broadcasting it across the field. Now, this is more applicable for us in, corn or soybean production where we're in a row pattern versus if we were in a winter wheat or barley where we have a lot, more closer row times together. So two methods that this strip tilling solves is one, reducing potential runoff and by putting it in the soil versus it being on top and washing off. And two, allowing us to cut back on the amount that we would apply because we're putting it right in the concentrated area where the plant will be.
Very good description. Now, a follow-up question about Haynie Family Foods, and I wanted to remind our listeners there is a website, HaynieFamilyFoods.com. That's HAYNIE, FamilyFoods.com. PJ, I understand this is a relatively new enterprise for your family.
It is. So the concept started as on the intro, I'm one of the founding members for the National Black Growers Council, a nonprofit organization whose mission is very simple. It's to improve the efficiency, productivity, and sustainability of Black row crop farmers. And, as far as Black row crop operators, we're very small in number across the U.S. Statistics show that there are more bald eagles in the lower 48 states than there are Black row crop farmers. And when I'm talking row crops, I'm talking corn, soybeans, cotton, peanuts, rice, wheat, large acre production, commodities produced across larger acreage. And it would be just in a livestock or more of an urban vegetable type of operation. And, the thought was if we have such a small number, create a means to offer opportunities to help that small number of farmers have access to some of the latest and greatest advancements in agriculture, seed and chemistry and technology. And we're very fortunate to have sustaining members like John Deere and Bayer and Corteva and Syngenta and so many others that I'm not going to name all 20 plus of our sustaining members. But we host a series of field days across the country where we showcase the latest and greatest crop protection chemistry that's available to us, seed varieties, John Deere and equipment manufacturers do varieties and information. So we want to showcase that to most of your historically underserved producers who don't have access to that on a regular basis. When I met this group in 2009, I was totally intrigued because I come from a very non-diverse part of production agriculture over in the Northern Neck. And, I was 30 years old before I met another large acre Black farmer who was farming more land than my family was. And, we all realized that we were kind of had similar challenges as we were spread across the country in these little islands that we set on. So that's how the organization got started. After I met these gentlemen in 2009, I was so intrigued. I drove to visit them. I drove to Texas and Arkansas and Louisiana, and I was intrigued at how early these guys started planting before we did in Virginia. I'll never forget, I was on the tractor with Mr. Jacobs in February. He was planting corn in Texas. I called home to check on my dad and see what our guys were doing in Virginia. He said the highway department had just called. We got a snowstorm coming. We got 3 tractors headed to push snow. So my Virginia Tech Ag Econ gears got to turning, and I said, well, I know we've got 3 planters sitting in the shed, and we typically don't pull them out until the 1st of April to start planting. We had a farm down south. We have our own trucking company. We could mobilize some equipment down here to start planting about a month to 6 weeks before we started Virginia. So, with that idea and my family's support, I stepped out on a limb of faith about 10 years ago to go down to the Delta to expand our operation. Never thought that I would get into rice production, more or less rice processing. And as I've been into the rice industry, I've learned that there's a commodity that's grown that we actually can consume. And even though the wheat that we grow goes into bread and the corn goes into grits and the soybeans go into vegetable oil, but the rice is more of a direct product, and it's not through a protein that you would get on your dinner plate. And, as I look back at my family and I go back 5 generations, my grandfather sold corn to Purdue and to Tyson's. My father sold corn to Purdue and Tyson's, and so am I. And unfortunately, I'm getting the same price today that my grandfather got 40 years ago, except for his combine was $60,000 and mine is over $600,000. And the only way I figured I could close that gap is to try to capture more value. So, Haynie Family Foods is a way for us to go from farm to table in the commodity space by being able to offer a finished product that you as a consumer would use for what we grow. So the rice that we grow on our farm in Arkansas, we can process that rice and offer that to use and to food service distributors. We're mostly dealing with larger 50-pound bags for food service distributors, pet food companies, and things like that. However, the idea is to take the wheat that we grow and have that process into flour, because there's more money. The retail price point on a 2-pound bag of flour at the grocery store is more than a 60-pound bag of wheat that we would sell off the hopper truck, you know? So again, we're just looking to vertically integrate, capture more value for what we grow, so this farm can sustain for generations to come. The old cliche says, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got.
And I want to remind our listeners that the web address is hayniefamilyfoods.com. That's HAYNIE familyfoods.com. And Mary, I understand you have a question, just a couple of minutes left.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, PJ, you started answering my question because I'm really interested in this markets piece, and I'm hoping maybe we can get you to stick around for a second episode and talk a little more about that. But just in short, in the last minute or so we have here, what's it been like changing those markets in dealing with different processors, buyers? Has that been a learning curve?
It has been a extremely steep learning curve, and it's had its challenges that I wouldn't have anticipated. But what keeps me awake is the promise of my rice that I grow on my farm and I process at my family's mill being served in the dining halls at Virginia Tech, feeding the constituents of my alma mater right there. My kids are in college and advanced degrees in medical school and law school, and them to one day hopefully see the product that their family grow come across their lunch plates at their college lunch tables. That's where we see the opportunity to create value for future generations. I've told my children that, hey, you don't want to farm, you don't have to, but you can still be in the food business because people are going to have to eat every day. So I see the long-term play here in food compared to feed. All right?
Our guest in this episode, PJ Haynie from the northern neck of Virginia, a very diversified farming operation and agribusiness. Once again, that web address is hayniefamilyfoods.com. PJ, will you be able to stay online with us for another 10 or 15 minutes and record a second episode?
Absolutely.
Great. All right, we look forward. I know I've still got a lot of questions. Mary and Eric, we'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff and PJ and Mary.
Thank you.
And I would like to take just a moment to remind our listeners to like and subscribe to this podcast. You can do so at your favorite podcast platform or, of course, our website, forthesoil.org. And it greatly helps us when you like and subscribe to the podcast. And more people can learn about healthy soils and, of course, about this podcast, For the Soil, a Conversation. For the Soil, a Conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. And if you have a specific question about soil health, just contact your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a Conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.